and blah, blah, blah. My understanding is that I think one of the local jurisdictions is acting on their own, but the other one, is it two, Dr. Garcia? Or I just wanted to know who those were.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Scott, the opt-in jurisdictions following the signature of this IGA will be Marana, City of Tucson, and South Tucson. The opt-out jurisdictions are Oro Valley and Sahuarita.
Okay.
What that means is that those are the ones that get checks cut almost immediately or 10 days after we receive the wire transfers for the full amount. The other jurisdictions have allowed the pooling of those resources for better planning and implementation.
And is there any, I don't recall that either the nation nor the tribe were part of the One Arizona settlement. That's correct, isn't it?
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Scott, you are correct. There is a separate legal action that was brought forth by tribal communities that is still to be resolved, at least in this state. I can tell you, though, that we are tightly working with PYT and TON, as well as the Tucson Urban Indian Center and other urban serving American Indian institutions.
Thank you.
And this contract is going to be voted on by the City of Tucson Mayor and Council today. So, all right. So we have a motion, a second. We passed it, right? We're done. Okay. Yay. Good work, everybody. I know that was a lot. And I think that it's important that we got to a point where we all could agree, because it's good to partner, especially on this issue in a regional way for solution. So item number 32. Classification compensation, adding some new classifications. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
A motion is second by Supervisor Scott. Discussion.
Madam Chair, just a quick
Supervisor
question.
Christie.
Are
Yes.
these, again, new positions in response to the CBIZ?
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor
Mr.
Christie, yes, there's simply new classifications in response to the study.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Item passes unanimously. Can we move items 33 through 36?
So, second?
Okay, so I have a motion. I'll move and you seconded. Anybody, any discussion?
Yes, Madam
Yes, go
Chair.
ahead.
Quick question. If you look at the map of the Quail Canyon property, there are, in the agenda, there are 4 items, four parcels that are involved here. 1, 2, 3, 4. What about the 5th one? Why wasn't that considered, and why wasn't that purchased as well? And if you look along the I believe it'd be the west side of all those parcels, there's kind of a cone, a pie-shaped or cone-shaped large parcel section. And I'd like to know, is there any plans or dispensation of that in the process? But why just these 4 parcels and not the 5th one at the top?
So, Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, these parcels were acquired as part of the Culp Road Improvement Process project. And so this was part of the 1997 HERF bond funds, right? And finally delivered recently. And at the time of property acquisition, it was those properties that were identified as being necessary for the roadway improvements. So specifically why that one or those others that you're talking about were not acquired, I can't speak to directly, but it would have been associated with the design of the cross section of the roadway, which of those were necessary to be acquired by the Department of Transportation.
And Madam Chair, Mr. DeBonis, you don't know what plans are in the store for this unimproved piece that runs along to the west?
So, Madam Chair, Supervisor Christie, we can do a little more research and get some information back to the board.
Okay, take your time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed. Item passes unanimously. We're going to go to 37, but we have to do 52 first. And this is to provide purchase and sale agreement contract for a 50-year term. Oh, I'm sorry. I wrote my notes wrong. Okay, 37. This is a cellular license agreement, communication easement resolution number 2024-20. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
Motion is second by Supervisor Scott. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Item passes unanimously. Now we go on to 52. This is to provide purchase and sale agreement, the contract amount. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
A motion is second by Supervisor Scott. Discussion. All in favor, say aye. Opposed. Item passes unanimously. Can we, oh shoot. 38 is a request for drainage easement. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
Motion is second by Supervisor Scott. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Item passes unanimously. Item number 39, sale of real property, resolution number 2024-19. Did I read this right? It's over 4,000 acres for under $30,000. Is that right? Just want to make sure my eyes aren't bleary.
I apologize, Chair. I was writing notes from the last item. And
Sorry.
Did not, which number are you speaking?
39?
Item number 39, right. So this is a treasurer's deed, and that item is $16,900 is the sale of funds.
Okay. For that acreage though?
So it indicates that the parcel is 4.133 acres of
Oh,
land.
4.1. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind. Okay, great. 4 acres, not 4,000. Like, what is happening? Okay.
My apologies. Yes,
No, it's my
not
fault.
a comma. It's
I was
it's a decimal.
Yeah, okay, great. All right. So, did we have a motion? I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second by Supervisor Christie. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Item passes unanimously. We've addressed 40. Item number 41 is the International Sonoran Alliance. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
Have a motion and a second by Supervisor Scott. Can you go out? Oh, okay. So this, I do have a question on this one because this one has been extended for a number of cycles since April 2021. Is that right? And so I'm wondering if we get to December 2024 and Ajo Plaza Life Safe, like those improvements have not been able to be made, can the county work with them to try to find somebody, or can we go out and do it? Because we just keep voting on extending it because they apparently can't find somebody to do these repairs, but they have the money for it.
We can report back in.
Thank you. Okay, so a motion a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Item passes unanimously. We've done 42. 43 is Pima Community College to provide job training. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
Just for
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Grijalva, just
Thank
to
you.
be clear that it is a decrease in funding.
Yes, this is a decrease in funding. The contract amount decreased. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor. say-
Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor Christie.
Discussion. Madam Chair, it is a decrease in funding. What's going to happen to this money that's being decreased? The decreased amount?
Administrator Lesher.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, if you recall, from time to time, we bring back to this board a reallocation of unspent or unauthorized ARPA dollars. This would be put back into the pool and come back to this board for reallocation
And where did the money come from originally, Madam Chair?
from ARPA, from the
So this was
American
federal.
Recovery. It is part of the American Recovery Act.
Was it ever considered, Madam Chair, Ms. Lesher, to return it to the federal government? Where it came from?
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, heretofore, all those dollars have returned back to the board for reallocation.
Okay. Madam Chair, Ms. Lesher, it was reduced because was there no demand for the program or?
Chair Grijalva and Mr.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, this was an item that the board actually approved the last ARPA reallocation. They were struggling to actually meet the spend down requirements from the date that money would have been unable to be encumbered. And so as with discussions with Pima Community College, that was an agreement that was made. So those funds have already been reallocated based on the approval that was done the last time.
They've already been reallocated?
That's correct. That was this particular reduction was approved by the board as part of the ARPA reallocations that was done last month. We're coming back to the board because it's a contractual obligation. So because we're reducing the contract, the board has to approve that reduction.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed. Item passes unanimously. Item number 44 is Tucson Unified School District to provide childhood immunization and other health services. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
Have a motion, a second by Supervisor Scott. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Item passes unanimously. Item number 45, United Way to provide ECAP campaign. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
Have a motion, a second by Supervisor Scott. Discussion. This is the 55th year they've done this. It's kind of cool. All in favor, say aye. Opposed.
Opposed?
Item passes 4-1 with Supervisor Christie voting no. Any issues with taking 46, 47, 48, 49, 50?
Have a question on 50?
Okay, so we'll do items 46 through 49 together. I'll go ahead and move all of those items.
Second.
A motion, a second by Supervisor Scott. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Item passes unanimously. And you had a question on 49?
50.
50, I apologize. 50 is to provide point of sale reservation system. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
I have a motion, a second by Supervisor Scott. Supervisor Christie.
First of all, who are it says $750,000 in revenue. Where does the revenue come from, Madam Chair?
Administrator Lesher.
Chair Grijalva, Mr. Cadonis.
Madam Chair and Supervisor Christie, so this is a point of sale system that's used by our Natural Resources, Parks and Recreation Department. So it would be for paying fees for programming and rental of facilities that are parks and recreation centers and things of that nature. So that's the, 2-year term and the revenue that's generated through our parks fee ordinance that people would pay online for.
And Madam Chair, Mr. DeBonis, where do the accrued revenues go?
Madam Chair and Supervisor Christie, those go into special revenue funds in the Natural Resources, Parks and Recreation Department and get invested back into then the facilities and the amenities that we have in the park system.
Madam Chair, Mr. DeBonis, at one point in discussion with the new director, he mentioned a director's discretionary fund. Does that go into his discretionary fund?
So, Madam Chair and Supervisor Christie, I'm not familiar with the term of discretionary fund. So there is a special revenue fund that goes into investments in parks. So that may be what he was referring to when he indicated that. So the department director, along with the team there, has the ability to annually identify what the need priorities are and then invest those dollars in those upgrades. So it could be playground system infrastructure, it could be lighting system improvements, it could be routine maintenance or service expansion if we're offering new programs, a new class, or things of that nature.
Madam Chair, and does that go before the Parks Board first for any kind of a discernment or?
So, Madam Chair and Supervisor Christie, the Parks Commission meets on a regular basis, and there is a director's update that is part of that process. So any capital improvement plans are the commission receives notification of those capital improvement plans on a regular basis and an ongoing basis, program expansions and things of that nature. Yes, those are the types of things that advisory commission would hear about and then be able to provide input back to the director on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bonus.
Okay, so I believe we have a motion and a second on 50. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed. Item passes unanimously. Now we're on 51. Do we want to? Okay, we'll just do 51. 51 is Motorola Solutions. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Item passes unanimously. Item number 54, Resolution number 2024-21, authorizing the approval of Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force's fiscal year 2024 agreement. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
Have a motion and a second by Supervisor Scott. Discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed. Item passes unanimously. We've addressed 55, correct? And now we're on 56. This is to provide opioid abatement funding. It's accepting a grant. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
Have a motion and a second by Supervisor Scott. Discussion.
Chair Grijalva.
Supervisor Scott.
I just wanted to, this is my mistake, but I had emailed the county administrator yesterday with some requests that I made. The last time we talked about the opioid settlement fund and asked for some additional information on that. I neglected to bring that up when we were talking about the IGA. So just want to renew that request from yesterday. And that was for information to the entire board, not just to my office.
All right. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed. Item passes unanimously. I apologize. We're going to have to take a very quick break because we've run out of memory in the DVD for our recording. You're welcome, everyone. Okay. So as soon as we get that, we'll come back. Right. You want us to wait though, right? And take a break? Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
You stressed, she's like, we're done with minutes. I'm like, okay. All right. Sorry, we can continue. So can we take items 57 through 67?
I have 58 I have questions on, but other than,
Okay, so 57 through 67 excluding 58. Does that work?
Correct.
I'll go ahead and move those.
Second.
Have a motion and a second by Supervisor Scott. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Item passes unanimously. And then item number 58 is U.S. Department of Homeland Security Federal Emergency Management Agency Food and Shelter Program. I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
Have a motion and a second by Supervisor Scott. Supervisor
Chair?
Christie. Mhm.
thank you. We've got roughly 3 years of funding of EFSP, which this comes under. And that 3 years of funding was designated for migrant shelters. Now it appears that that same funding is not for migrants, but is being reimagined, if you would, for residents facing homelessness. So 2 questions I have, Madam Chair. What is going to happen? And is this in some sort of competition with the EELS program that we already have in place? And are migrants involved in this particular funding?
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Christie, happy to provide clarity and understand the confusion. Understand that that the Emergency Food and Shelter Program has been ongoing for more than a decade, long before there was a migrant crisis. And that was the mechanism that FEMA used in order to resource some emergency food and shelter programs, emergency sheltering. That same mechanism, you are right, has been used by the same agency to fund some of its work with asylum seekers. These are completely unrelated. They are run out of the same agency, the same program, but completely unrelated and segregated funds. So no, none of these dollars that are being that are under consideration by the board today, none of these dollars are for asylum seekers. All of these dollars are part of the allocation that we receive, that the county receives to provide food and shelter assistance and some utility and rental assistance. Is it a substitute for the EELS program? No, that is a completely different, although related component. This is essentially a formula allocation from FEMA for homelessness.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. We have a motion and a second for 58. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed.
Opposed?
Item passes 4-1 with Supervisor Christie voting no. Now we're on to hearings. Is anyone here Okay, I apologize. Now we're taking a break. We've hit the map.
Right when we hit the
So we're,
liquor.
right now we hit the liquor license. We're done. So you'll just let me know. Do you want to take at least a 5 minute? Okay, 5 minute break. Thank you.
Murphy for one versus the closest unit, diabetic mobile is 4540 West Trinidad, Yellow, person of 6.
They are 3 liquor licenses.
She's parking now. Hold on, copies are going to be more.
Bar, 69 Three Canyon Beer and Wine Garden, 70 Three Canyon Beer and Wine Garden. One is the Series 7 and one is the Series 12. Any of those? Anyone here in opposition? Okay, so I'll go ahead and move to close the public hearing and approve the liquor licenses for 68, 69, and 70.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion, a second by Supervisor Scott. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Item passes unanimously 4-0. And then we have, what do we have? Going on the addendum, we've addressed all of them. No, yes, we've addressed all of them except for number 7. So number 7 is a study session. This is discussion only regarding the fiscal year 2024-25 recommended budget. Administrator Lesher.
Thank you very much, Chair Grijalva, members of the board. In a moment, I'm going to turn over to Finance Director Moulton, who will do an overview of where we are with the process. Our hope for today, excuse me, I just put a mint in my mouth, is to get feedback, questions, comments. For those of you who recall when we did these budget sessions a couple of years ago, we don't have a lot of staff here, as you can see, between finance and our deputy county administrators. We can try to answer some questions. The others we will take down. Any questions, comments, and our commitment is to get you a response in writing and to be posted within 48 hours. Okay, thank you. Ms. Moulton.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisors, thank you for letting us present to you the recommended budget for fiscal year 24-25. Next slide, please. As with last year, we have 4 budget focus areas. These are the budget pillars and the various goals. You would have seen longer versions of these as part of the strategic planning that was presented at earlier board meetings. The 4 areas are core functions and excellent service, improve the quality of life, critical infrastructure and economic growth, conservation, sustainability, and climate resiliency. Each one of these 4 pillars have a variety of goals and processes where we're going to try to achieve those, and they are reflected in how the budget was put together and a reflection of put your money where your mouth is, basically. So these are what the goals are, and the budget reflects that. Next slide, please. Not that any of you necessarily need a reminder, but the economic outlook for the United States is not that spectacular. We are seeing some trends that are concerning to us. You have seen these reported in our quarterly economic reports for the last year. The 7 indicators that we are paying attention to, all of them are trending unfavorable. They include inflation, housing, retail sales, gasoline sales, federal funds rate, and unemployment. So we are looking at some moderate to high headwinds for our economic outlook. Next slide, please. All of these factors impact the 2025 budget, the recommended budget that's in front of you. Additional uncertainties are the state has not yet adopted its budget. Typically, at this point, the state has adopted its budget and has told us what portion we are required to pay to them. We have that in a couple of places, but we don't have the entire budget yet. So there is some uncertainty that once they pass their budget, we might have to make some adjustments to our budget. And those areas start in the state shared revenue. They have, over the last number of years, the state shared tax revenue has been increasing. They are forecasting a flattening out of that, so we're not seeing that move up anymore. The big one for us is the state cost shifts. We don't know what they're going to do. And then unfortunately, inflation is still quite prevalent. And my prognostication skills are not that great. I don't see it downturning anytime soon. Next slide, please. So this is a representation of the budget for fiscal year 24-25. We have the revenues by sources and fund balance and the expenditures by functional area. This is for the entire county. So we talk about a $1.7 billion county expense budget. This is what you're seeing here. You see that on the expenditure side, 550 million basically in the general governmental services area, 109 million in health services, 403 million in justice and law, 480 roughly million in public works, and 185 million in community resources. That makes up the Pima County budget as a whole. On the revenue side, you see we have $1.9 million in revenue and fund balance. 1.9 billion, sorry. Property taxes, $574 million. Charges for services, $254 million. Those are generated by departments doing the business that they do, either fees for service, permits, etc. Intergovernmental revenues, $580 million. A lot of that is state shared sales tax, grants, monies from the state that are programmed to come to us. Another 60 million in other revenues. And finally, there is $465 million in fund balance from all of the various funds within the county. Next slide, please. This is a different breakdown of the budget by fund or fund category. We have the general fund, special revenue funds, which include grants, the debt service fund, the capital projects funds, and the enterprise funds. The enterprise funds are basically those that are business related, such as the wastewater fund, the parking garages, development services. You can see here, and I if you want me to, I can go through all of the numbers, but basically these are the 5 fund types and they're broken down, and you can see the beginning fund balance, the revenues, the transfers in, less the expenditures and the transfers out, so that in the general fund, we start with 125 million of fund balance. And we end with a 0 fund balance, meaning that all of the money that we have received, we plan to spend. That includes the 97 million of the general fund balance reserve as per policy. Do you have any questions, or do you want me to go through all of these fund types? Thank you.
Madam Chair. Very
Supervisor
quickly,
Christie.
the fund balance reserve, isn't that mandated, or are you just using that for your process?
The general fund balance is a board policy, and 97 million of it is included in our budget as part of the state requirements. We have to budget to spend it, so it's included in the expenditures. This next slide talks about what is in the general fund. The revenues for the general fund come primarily from property taxes of 464 million. The state and other tax revenues from the state, 235 million. A variety of departmental fees and admin overhead charged to those other departments of about 40 million. Other revenues, a small amount of 17 million. That's from the general fund departments charging for the services that they provide, such as the recorder's office or the courts. the fund balance of 125 million and transfers in. Transfers in are payments basically from other departments, the non-general fund departments, paying to the general fund for general fund services, such as finance, procurement, general county overhead. That makes up a portion of this. Another portion of this is made up of the indirect cost allocation that is charged to various grants to pay for those same general fund services. Next slide, please. So where does the general fund money get spent? You can see here that the largest percentage of the money is spent in justice and law. That makes up a plethora of departments, including the sheriff's department, the county attorney, all of the courts, as well as the public defense services. The next largest area is the general government services. Followed by the health department, health services, which include not just the health department, but behavioral health, followed by public works, community resources, and then transfers out. The transfers out represent payments to other funds, transfers to capital project fund to fund capital projects that were paid for via property taxes. Next slide, please. The restricted funds and taxing districts. Anything that's not in the general fund is considered a restricted fund. These would include the library district, which is a separate taxing district, the flood control district, which also has a separate taxing district, but would also include other restricted funds such as the health department or any of the other special revenue funds where the money is restricted to be spent on specific purposes. The breakdown of these monies represent $1.3 billion going to the various services that we just talked about, health services, some justice and law, some general government services, community resources, public works, et cetera. This next slide, please. This next slide is the expenditures on those same restricted funds and taxing districts. The previous slide showed a $1.3 billion revenue flow. This shows a $1.1 billion expenditures. You can see that in some cases we are taking in more money than we are allocating to spend in the current year. Any of that differential will flow into the fund balances of those restricted funds to be used for future projects or capital projects that might need to come up in the future. Next slide, please. The fiscal year 24-25 recommendations. We are making a recommendation that we keep the overall Pima County tax rate unchanged at 5.1048. That is the overall tax rate. There are changes within the 4 types of taxes, but we are requesting to keep this, the total tax rate flat. On the expense side, we're recommending $15.8 million in supplementals to the general fund. We are requesting $1 million be set aside for the class and comp phase 3 implementation. We are also requesting reductions. We are using the ARPA reallocation of funds to reduce expenditures by 10 million, funding those expenditures through the ARPA reallocation. We are also recommending a 2% cut in all general fund departments. That reduction is approximately 11.5 million. That reduction applies to all general fund departments, elected officials, and non-elected official departments. And we are recommending an outside agency reduction of $300,000. Next slide, please. This is just some additional information so that when we're talking later this afternoon to give you a sense of where things are. If we were to do a 1% reduction in expenses to the entire general fund, that would equate to about $5.7 million. An increase in the primary property tax rate, 1 penny on the primary property tax rate will garner approximately $1.1 million in revenue. And 1 penny increase on that tax rate would cost the average homeowner whose home is $225,000, approximately $2.24 per year. So that's just informational. So when we're looking at either the tax rates or the reductions, you have a frame of reference. So that ends the presentation portion. Happy to try, as Ms. Lesher indicated, to answer any questions that you might have. Anything that we can't answer today, we'll be happy to get you an answer within 48 hours.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Scott, Supervisor Christie, and Supervisor Lee.
This is where I have questions, and I don't know if any of them can be answered today. But if you go to section 3.5, I'm sorry, page 3.5 on the, it's section 1 of the transmittal memo overview of the recommended budget, second paragraph, second sentence, and this is dealing with base budgets and supplementals. It says, requests surpassing this base budget had to be submitted as supplemental requests. These requests were evaluated by prioritizing areas with the greatest need, investing in new programs or initiatives, and augmenting funding for existing programs. Departments collectively submitted over $81 million in additional funding requests, with nearly $68.2 million incorporated into the recommended budget. Now, the very last page of our voluminous budget book shows all the supplemental requests. And what is really striking, I think not just to me, but probably would be to the average taxpayer, is the number of ongoing requests, which amounts to, $43.7 million all told. And then the one-time supplemental requests are $24.4 million. I would like some more information on all of those supplemental requests. And if there's a place to find them in the budget book, then, I can dig around for them. But the only thing that we have for supplemental requests is this document, front and back, and I'd like some more information on it because that is a substantial chunk of this budget.
Chair Grijalva, Supervisor Scott, thank you. We'll provide you with all the supplemental requests. Again, I think the fact that 43.7 are ongoing is something that was of a concern to us as well, but happy to provide each of those. And to the extent we can, our notes of the recommendations, those we did not recommend move forward along with those that we have.
And Ms. Moulton, you looked like you were getting ready to say something right before Ms. Lesher, but thank you, Ms. Lesher.
Chair Grijalva, supervisors, each department, when they submit a supplemental request, has a form that they fill out. So we have that level of detail and happy to put it in a place where everyone can get to it.
Wonderful. The second area where I have questions is if you go to page 313 in the transmittal memo, section 3, general fund ending fund balance. And it says the recommended general fund ending balance for fiscal year 2024 is projected to be $125,355,198, resulting from decreased expenses and higher than anticipated general government revenues. This amount represents an increase of $32,261,980 over the fiscal year 2023-2024 budgeted general fund reserve of $93,073,218. That is that's a big change from what we projected. And my memory, granted, only being in my first term, but having looked at budgets from previous years before I was on the board, my memory is it's almost always higher and almost always substantially higher than what we projected. I mean, the difference between 93 million and 125 million, I mean, that's substantial. And what I'd like to know is what lessons are we learning from both last year and this year that we can apply moving forward so that there's not a $32.2 million gap between what we thought it would be and what it turned out to be. And I realize that's an inexact science and that we're also dealing with other people's numbers, perhaps especially from the state, but that's big, and it strikes me that it's always big.
Chair Grijalva, supervisors, you are correct. It is a fairly significant number. It comes from basically three areas this year. The state shared sales tax is higher than anticipated. That number is significantly lower than last year. We budgeted more in line with what the state was telling us in 2024. So while we are coming in at, is it like 15 million more? Well, it's only 4 million more in state shared sales tax. We also are seeing, we've had a significant increase in interest income. That was very hard to predict when we were budgeting, 18 months before the year started, before now. And so we're seeing a significant uptick in that as well. We have taken both of those things into consideration when creating the 25 budget. And then there's your particular favorite, vacancy savings. Again, that number is significant in the county, depending on what time of the year and what positions are vacant. So I believe that we have taken stock of the changes of the reality of what we budgeted versus what actually happened, and have tried to implement some of that knowledge into the 25 budget. Unfortunately, only time will tell if we did a better job. I'm anticipating that we have done a much better job. I believe that with the new board policy on vacant positions, we will also be able to more properly identify where those savings are earlier in the year so that we can tell you about them. Part of our issue, I believe, is that specifically with vacant positions, people tend to be optimistic that they will fill the positions that they need to fill. And as time moves on through the year, reality is not necessarily that. And so you see in the latter months of the forecast, departments coming to grips with the fact that they will not be able to fill those positions, or those positions that they thought they were going to fill early in the year were actually vacant for 9 months or 10 months of the year.
So thank you, Ms. Bolton. So I'd like a little bit more information than the transmittal memo shares as to the decreased expenses and higher than anticipated general government revenues. But more importantly, I'm interested in hearing more about the Monday morning quarterbacking that you all are doing that hopefully will help us to have closer to our estimate when we're sitting here next year. But you mentioned vacancy savings, and that is actually the third area where I have questions. So budgeted FTEs are 23 more than we had this year. And that's said to be mostly attributed to the sheriff's department and wanting to make sure that they can keep up with the admirable hiring and recruiting that they're doing. But we just got the vacancy summary on yesterday, and we have 950 vacant positions. The new policy that we passed doesn't go into effect until July 1st. But what I'm wondering, given that this 900 to 1,000 figure has been a staple at the county level for many, many years, why weren't current vacancies taken into account when budgets were created? It seems to me that optimism that you were just referring to pervaded all of our departments. And so my essential question is, why didn't the longstanding vacancy rate of 900 to 1,000 better inform budget development? Because if you take a look at the 12 departments with a vacancy rate of 16% or higher, 5 of them are budgeted more FTEs next year than they have this year. 5 of them have less. 2 of them are roughly the same. But the biggest reduction in FTE is in Parks and Recreation. And the only reason for that, as it says in the narrative portion of the comparison memo we got, is because they're being moved into a new department, into CLS. So what I am failing to understand is why a county that has historically had 900 to 1,000 vacant positions at any given time during any given year didn't take that into account when it was putting its budgets together. And I realize that's a question that would have to be posed to every department director and every elected official. And I don't feel like it was, because if I get that we're in a way we're waiting for the policy, but we were talking about the budget long before, months before that policy. And all of our directors and elected officials are essentially budgeting either for around the FTE they have this year or maybe slightly more, slightly less. So I just don't understand why that wasn't taken into account. And I'd also like to ask that it be taken into account. I mean, it seems to me we've got time between now and May 21st to follow up with directors and elected officials. And I really appreciated having both this report, the vacancy summary, and this comparison memo, because you can compare what departments have now, what they want next year, and there really isn't that much of a change, except for those 46.63 FTE that are going out of Parks and Recreation into CLS, but CLS is going to have 65.5 FTE. So it's not, so they're getting even more than what they're getting. I just don't feel like we took that as a county, that we took into account that we've been carrying around 900 to 1,000 vacant positions.
Chair Gahalva,
Yes.
supervisors, when you look at the county as a whole, yes, we still have that 900 to 1,000 vacant positions. You noted that the overall FTE went up 23. But if you were to look at the memo that talks about the budget comparison and look at it individually, you will see that, yes, Parks and Rec got split, CLR was formed, sustainability went away, that was folded into CLR or CLS, but individual departments did take a look at some of their FTEs. You will note, maybe not enough, but you will note that, for example, fleet services went down 1, grants management went up 11, half an FTE here and there. Public defense services dropped 9. Real property went down 1. Each individual department that we worked with took a look at their FTEs and did an assessment. If that assessment was critical enough based on, where we stand with the 900 to 1,000, that I believe is probably open for discussion.
I think that assessment, and I get that they did, because I went through every column on this table. You can tell that they did, but I think their assessment was based on that optimism that you referred to when you were talking about the previous topic. I think history would belie being optimistic. And so I hope we can go back and look at these recommendations from the departments, taking into account the history of all these vacant positions. See, I told you I didn't think any of these three things would.
I just
be
want to make
answerable
2
today.
comments, if I might, Supervisor Grijalva. And on the third point, we'll go through and provide that individual analysis. One of the things we're looking at, and I'll tell you, this is not answer each of those, but as an example, we have had, I'll use fleet services or facilities management, I think is a better example. Right now, we have a variety of positions that have been open far too long. They have been some of the top of what we've looked at in the compensation classification analysis. We have them identified in sort of a hot list that they remain unfilled. We have no locksmith, as is an example. We're trying to fill and find those positions. So we can certainly go through. It does not answer each and every one of the 900, but many of those are ones that we hope will be addressed that remain critical to the county. In some of these facilities management, fleet services areas that we hope we've addressed the ability to fill the position through the class and comp study. We always look at the vacancy savings. So let us do that crosswalk for you. And the other item, I just wanted to go back for a moment about, as you've noticed, the significant increase in fund balance. And just as a reminder and sort of a placekeeper, one of the things we have been trying to do in the last couple of years is make sure that we grow ever closer, if you will. That I think when you came on the budget or in the early years, our fund balance was estimated generally between $40 and $42 million. And then we would end the year at $125 million. And each budget started with an initial summary of all the things we were recommending were paid for by that additional 80-some thousand or $80 million. And so what we've tried to do is make sure that rather than indicating there's 40 million here, but there might be additional dollars made possible by vacancy savings or something, that we have provided complete transparency about what actually is that fund balance. We've not yet found that math to get to exactly where we need to go. But I would suggest that the difference between 93 and 125 is a lot better than 40 and 125. So we hope to continue to move in that direction. Thank you for highlighting that area because it is one that continues to need work.
I appreciate that very much. And I just had one other quick question, and it's back on the number of positions. If you go to page 313 and the table that shows budgeted FTEs, there's 7,100 budgeted FTEs for this fiscal year, the fiscal year that we're in right now. But the vacancy summary from Monday says 7,478 positions. So are those additional 378 positions grant funded?
Chair Grijalva, supervisors, I would have to look at that, but throughout the year, we add positions.
Oh.
So you have the budget number, which gets set in May. And And then if new grants are added, new PCNs are added, if a department requests an additional PCN and can fund it, those requests are also looked at. So I would need to look at that differential.
No, just the explanation is fine because it's obviously a combination of grant-funded positions and then times where additional PCNs were requested and granted. No, that's fine. Thank you.
Supervisor Christie?
Three quick things, Ms. Molden. If I recall, you've been here from the beginning of the meeting, right? So I think you need to apply for hazard pay and deserve it. First, can you provide my office with an analysis comparison of the 2019 budget versus the proposed budget? And you don't need to go too deeply into the weeds, but a significant comparison of an overview of the more important factors or the more factors that really stand out, so we can compare what we had in 2019 versus what we're proposing today.
Chair Gahalva, Supervisor Christie, we'd be happy to do that. I cannot commit to getting that done in the next 48 hours.
Oh, no. I should have made that clear. As soon as it's possible for you to.
Excuse, Chair Grijalva, if I may, Supervisor Christie, I just want to be clear because sometimes where we snap the line matters. Looking at that, we're getting to pre-COVID versus now. Okay.
Exactly.
Sometimes as a fiscal year changes, I want to make sure that we provided the answer to your question. If we do the 1920 versus today, it's probably going to get you dangerously close to what you're looking for. I just want to be able to see.
Well, that's probably a better way of putting it. What it was, what the budget was as a comparison pre-COVID versus what we're being proposed to today. The second thing, Ms. Moulton, could you give us a kind of a roadmap to where we would have to be for a revenue neutral primary property tax rate?
Chair Gahalva, Supervisor Christie, that I can get you in the next 48 hours. We already have that done. I don't have it at my fingertips, but we did do the math on that.
Great. That's all I need. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Supervisor Lee?
Thank you, Chair Grijalva. Yeah, I have quite a few questions, so I don't know if I want to take all my colleagues' times here, but couple of things that are questions that I want to understand the tax levy. And I'm looking at are you going? Listen to this.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Hey,
Oh,
I guess he doesn't want to listen to the answer here. Okay, what I'm looking.
I'm sorry, just to pause. Supervisor
Yeah.
Christie has left for the record.
Oh,
Okay,
thank
so
you.
we're now down to 4.
I'm looking at the memorandum from County Administrator Lesher, April 26th, transmittal of the fiscal year 24-25 budget, and it's the summary. So if you go to page 15, I want to understand, and you go down like 4 paragraphs, I'll read it. The benchmark set by the state truth and taxation statute is more stringent than the county's maximum allowable primary levy limit, which is linked to a moderate annual inflation rate of 2% as stipulated in the Arizona Constitution. As per the maximum allowable primary levy limit, the county can increase its primary rate to $4.71, which is a 0.61% higher than 61 cents higher than the recommended general fund rate. Consequently, the constitutional imposed levy limit is 530 million, surpassing the recommended primary property tax rate by 69.6 million or 13.1%. Can you explain that?
Chair Cahalva, supervisors, I can try. What you have here is there are a couple of different statutes and constitution that governs how much you can raise property tax rates on any given year.
Yeah.
So the maximum allowable property tax limit says that we can have a general primary property tax rate of 4.7175. We are recommending a 4.0102 rate for the general fund. That's where the 61.85 cents comes from. And if we were to take the 4.7175 maximal allowable primary levy limit
Yes.
and times that times our net assessed value, we would get the 539 million for the maximum amount of general fund levy that you could impose if you went to the total maximum limit.
Okay, so thank you, Madam Chair. So what the maximum levy, as I'm reading this, that we are allowed to is that 69.6 million or 13.1%?
No, the maximum levy limit is the 530.9 million, which is higher than what we are recommending by 69.6 million.
Okay, so our table, our high table, we can go up to that high table should we need to.
Choose to.
Okay, and that's important to know. So one of the things that I've looked at is over the last, I think somewhere in here, it had a nice table on where we're like the same levy that we were. Do you know where that table is? It goes back. It's in here somewhere. Limit capital.
We actually have a table printed that shows the last 10 years. If we can hand that out to you.
That would be great. Only because one of the things that I'm concerned about, and it's too bad my colleague Supervisor Christie's not here, is that when I was on the Pima Community College Board, thank you, we almost always went the maximum levy, which was for us 2%. And that was because that of inflation, state cuts, and it's what we're seeing now. If I looked at somewhere in here, I marked it because it stood out. Going back to 2014, we have lost $30 million in state funding. Is that correct? Somewhere in here, I remember seeing it. Oh, since 2014, because we lost $16 million